Welcome to the Women Inspired podcast, brought to you by Modern Well, a beautiful woman-centered collaborative workspace in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm your host, April Seifert, psychologist, entrepreneur, and self-proclaimed life experience junkie. Each week, I will introduce you to a different woman who is succeeding and inspiring others in one way or another. We'll dive into her story, her successes, failures, and the lessons she has learned along the way, all with the goal of inspiring you to listen to that inner voice who keeps reminding you that there is something you want to take action on. You are so much more capable and powerful than you give yourself credit for. Inside of you is a woman on fire. Let's let her out and see what happens. Here we go. Welcome back to the Women Inspired podcast. My name is April Seifert, and I am your host. This week, we are talking about intentional life design and how it is never too late to make changes in your life to bring it into alignment with your own goals and needs.
So people always called me a gypsy, and the same is true for my professional life. I never knew what I wanted to do, but I hopped from job to job. If I didn't like something, or if I don't know, I never liked when I was getting like a lot of pressure, or when I just didn't like my jobs, I changed them.
That was this week's guest, Kerstin Martin. At the age of 52, after a long, winding career that included IT project management work, a stint as a flight attendant, and many other stops along the way, Kerstin started her company focused on web design on the Squarespace platform. P.S. That's the platform I use, and I absolutely adore it. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Kerstin for two reasons. Number one, Kerstin is a gorgeous example of a person who's taken an intentional approach toward designing her own life. She rejected the notion that she had to stay and adapt to jobs and circumstances that just didn't work for her. Rather, she used her ability to adapt to make changes in her life until she ultimately stumbled upon her passion as a web designer, and she started her business at age 52. Also, number two, second reason why I wanted you to meet Kerstin, she has a powerful, practical skill set. Not a single month goes by where I'm not asked by someone about how I left my traditional job to become an entrepreneur. People want to know that story because they want to do the same thing. But so many people want to make that change, but one of the most common barriers I hear, I can't tell you how common it is people say they don't have technical skills and they aren't sure how to create their own website. When I stumbled upon Kerstin's website, it was beautifully designed. I loved how it functioned. And I saw that she was doing web design for other people on Squarespace as a platform. And I wanted to bring her on so that you could have access to one person who could help you get over that barrier, if that is the barrier that's holding you back from starting your own business. So here's your solution. That barrier's gone now. She can totally help you, and you can move forward and explore that passion project. I know you're going to leave this interview feeling completely inspired to design your own life. And so I'm thrilled for you to meet Kerstin Martin. Kerstin, I am so excited that you are joining us for this episode of the Women Inspired podcast, because I have been looking forward to talking to you after I found you online for a long time. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, April, for inviting me. I was very excited to get your invitation to the podcast. This is actually the first one I'm ever doing.
Yay!
So, thanks. Yay, I know.
Yay, number one. That's awesome. Well, this will be fun then. I'm really excited. So before we dive into the awesome work that you're doing, I would love it if you could help my audience get to know you, because they probably haven't run around the internet looking at information about you the way that I have. So help us get to know you and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
All right. Well, okay, I'll try. So as you can tell from my accent, I am not a native English speaker. I'm actually German. I grew up in Germany, and I've spent most of my adult life living abroad though. So I lived in England for 16 years. Until I met my American husband. We actually met online through a dating site.
Hey, you're like the second person. I met my husband on Match.com. That's awesome.
Did you really?
Yes.
That's amazing. Yeah, we met on Matchmaker.
Love it.
So And that was all of like 15 years ago. I was actually at the forefront of the whole online dating thing. I actually ran my own online dating site in London too at the time. I did that for 4 years, and but we only did that as a side job, so it never, I don't know, it never became a big enough thing. But I used to love online dating, and it totally works.
You're a pioneer. I love it. That's awesome.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah.
I had to interrupt.
Oh,
Keep
no,
going.
no, no. That's perfectly fine. But that's how I ended up in America. So in 2005, we got married and moved to America. He's originally from Massachusetts. I've moved a lot in my life. When I left school at the age of 19, I think I've moved more than 35 times. I've lived in 4 countries, so obviously in Germany. I spent many years in England, and I've lived in the US, and I've also lived in Canada for a few years as well. And so people always called me a gypsy. And the same is true for my professional life. I never knew what I wanted to do. I'm actually a university dropout. I only went to university because my grandparents wanted me to go, and wanted me to be the first one in a few generations to get a degree. But I hated university. I'm just not an academic. And I wanted to travel, so I got myself a job in Canada, moved to Canada. Eventually, I became a flight attendant, traveled around the world. I worked for Lufthansa at the time, and I loved it. And I stayed in the travel industry for many years. But I hopped from job to job, if I didn't like something, or if I don't know, I never liked when I was getting like a lot of pressure, or when I just didn't like my jobs, I changed them. But I also always felt, I was envious of doctors or lawyers because they seem to have such a straight path. And I always wondered, what is my passion? I don't know what my passion is. My passion, I guess, is moving and changing jobs. But you know what? I learned a lot in that time, and I've done many, many different things. So once I left the airline industry, I worked in technology. I was a project manager. I've worked in the financial industry as a corporate account manager, and I have managed hotels. I worked at a college, actually. When I moved to America, I worked for Amherst College. I was the secretary of the German department. Loved that job. That was really, really great. I was a registrar for an international school in Germany. So I've spent quite a few years in education, actually, which I always found ironic, given that I'm a university dropout. But I actually really enjoyed it. I really liked it. And but yeah, and all of these jobs, I've always, maybe it's because I'm German, I like to organize and I love technology. So I've always used technology to improve processes. And my employers loved it because I was always into the spreadsheets and databases and all that stuff. And so when we moved in 2014, sorry, I'm getting my timelines mixed up here. When we moved from the UK to the US, we basically decided, my husband and I, we wanted to settle down in the Pacific Northwest here in Bellingham. And we chose Bellingham because it's close to the Canadian border, where I still have a lot of friends from the time I used to live in Vancouver. And we both really love Bellingham. And so we both quit our jobs, and we were in our early 50s. So that was, it felt quite risky, actually. We called it our radical rethink. So we basically had a big radical rethink and quit our jobs, took the little money that we had saved. It was just enough to pay for the relocation and for us to live on for a few months, and just took a huge leap of faith. And this was probably more scary for my husband than for me, because I was used to changing things around, and he wasn't, but he took that leap of faith as well. And he found a new job within a month, thankfully. And in that transition, someone asked me to design a website for her, a friend of mine who has an art studio up in Vancouver. And I thought, yeah, I can do that. I can do that on Squarespace for you. Now, I've been designing websites actually since 1999, but only for myself. I used to learn, HTML and CSS. I used WordPress for many years. And then in 2008, I discovered Squarespace. Loved it, totally fell in love with it. And so I was always dabbling with I've been a blogger since 2005. So I was always dabbling with the design of my blogs, and people noticed that. And so I designed the website for my friend, and she did pay me for that too. And it was a huge success. Her sales went through the sky, and it really pushed her business actually to the next level. And then someone else asked me, "Oh, can you do my website too?" And then I thought, you know what? Instead of looking for a new job, why don't I do this? Why don't I become a web designer? And that is basically how I ended up at the age of 52, starting my own business. I never thought actually I would do that. I've always been employed. And now I'm in my 4th year, and it's been an amazing ride, and it's yeah. So here I am. I have a viable business, a successful business too. And my income increases every year, and it's been pretty amazing.
That's so awesome.
I hope that wasn't too long. I'm sorry. I just always feel like, because I've done so many things, it's a little hard sometimes to condense that into like 3 sentences.
No, I love it, because that's part of what I want to get into is your winding journey. Because sometimes people think that the path that they take after college or after high school or whatever it is, the path that they take as an adult should be linear, and you should stay and have loyalty to a particular company. And all of those sort of what I would consider outdated assumptions that people make about what an adulthood or a career should look like. And what struck me about something that I talk about fairly often on the podcast is this notion of, it's a design thinking notion where you're sort of testing and learning. You're making little bets, and you're kind of testing to see which things you like and which things you don't. And it can be hard for people, because people feel like once they've told people, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go try yoga," or "I'm going to try painting," or "I'm going to work at this company," once that's out there, it's like people feel more wedded to that thing than they need to be. Big deal. You changed your mind. It's okay. But it's hard sometimes to deal with, particularly what other people might think of us as we're trying something new and changing our mind. Did you run into people like that? Like, I don't know, friends, family, anything like that, or maybe just other people that you just came across as you were making some of these shifts and changing jobs? Did you hit people who were like, "What are you doing?" Or gave you any backlash for that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All the time. As I mentioned earlier, my grandparents wanted me to go to university to get a degree and to get a really good job. I mean, they obviously, in post-war Germany, education became really, really important. My mother, she was a little bit more lenient with that, because she had a bit of an unconventional path herself. But I certainly felt the pressure. So when I dropped out of university and became an au pair in Canada, my grandparents were just out of their mind. But I said, you know what, I just got to do this. I want to travel. I wanted to see the world, and I wanted to get out of Germany too. And Germany is wonderful, don't get me wrong, but I always knew I didn't want to spend the rest of my life there. So I had that a lot, certainly from my family, and sometimes also from friends a little bit. "Oh, what, you're changing jobs again? Why? And really, do you have to?" But to me, it was always, I think it's wonderful if you can early on identify your passion. But I think for most of us, it really doesn't work like that. And I think there's a lot of pressure on young people to know what they want to do. I mean, you're 18, 19, when you go to college here in the US, it's crazy to me that you already have to set a path at that age. And does it even have to be college? There's so much pressure nowadays to get a degree. But you know what? At least here, we're in America, you can still make it even without that. I believe that is still possible. That is still totally possible, I think. And especially, it's so expensive over here. I mean, it's crazy. So I think, I do believe it's more acceptable nowadays. Certainly my generation, there was definitely an expectation that you choose your profession and that's what you stick with. But I always walked to my own drum, basically. And I did feel bad sometimes. I did feel like a loser sometimes. Like, oh, why can't I figure this out? And is something wrong with me? Why do I have to keep changing jobs? Why can I not be happy somewhere? And it's not that I was always unhappy. I met a lot of great people. I made some really good friends, throughout my professional career. And I have had jobs that I really, really liked, like the one at Amherst College. I loved that job. And but yeah, this expectation that is there, that you should know that when you're young, I think is very unrealistic. I think nowadays it is actually easier because nowadays people don't necessarily expect you to work for one company for 20 years. That is actually more the exception, I think. And so try out different things. Can I share something that really, really helped me?
Yeah, definitely do.
When I was, gosh, how old was I? Like 38 or so. I was made redundant from the tech company that I worked for at the time. And they had merged with another big company and they made a whole bunch of people, like 100 people, redundant. And I was relieved because, to be honest, that was definitely not my dream job. I really liked the colleagues I worked with, but the job itself, being a project manager in IT, that just wasn't me. As part of the redundancy package, they gave us some career training. And so I attended these career training workshops. And one of the teachers there shared with us I think it's like the 7 Career Anchors by Edgar Schein. It's a very old concept. It's probably similar to the Breyer-Mix and all of those personality type testing tools that are out there. So this was I can't remember if it's 7 or 9, 7 Career Anchors. And it's basically all about identifying what drives you, what motivates you. And this has been around for quite a long time, actually. So we did this test and it turned out that my career anchor is lifestyle. So the most important thing for me is actually my lifestyle, my balance with my private life, my, where I live and having time for my friends and my family. So for me, it doesn't actually matter what kind of job I do, as long as my job supports the lifestyle that I want. And that was such an eye-opener, because I had been offered a role in corporate sales at the time. I never, ever saw myself as a salesperson. I'm a customer service person, but I sales, obviously I felt a bit too sleazy for me. And, but after this test, the teacher actually said to me, yeah, you can totally do a sales job. That would really support what you want to do. It would give you flexibility. You'd be able to travel. And I thought, hey, yeah, great. So I took the job and it changed everything. That job was quite a life changer. And so I think knowing what drives you, and you can do that when you're younger as well. There's so many tests out online that you can do. Really identify what drives you and then make your choices based on that. Because that was for me the point when I stopped feeling bad about being so flaky with all my job changes and all of that.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad you shared that. And it's true, like it's something else that I talk about occasionally on episodes of this podcast is when you're going through that self-exploration, stage or going through that self-exploration process, you have to be honest with yourself about what you're finding, right? Like it's one thing, to lie to your friends and family, or I don't want to say lie, but like maybe not be fully truthful to them about what lights you up and what gets you excited or whatever. That's fine. I mean, I don't know. You don't have to disclose everything about yourself to somebody else, but at least to yourself, be 100% truthful. Like if you were going to have 2 or 3 glasses of wine, like what would you say? How would you answer that question at that point? Be like super honest about it so that when your inhibitions are lowered, be super honest about it.
And use tools, because like I said, there are so many tools out there. Do these quizzes and because that can be really helpful, because sometimes, that can help you actually name it, and like see it in black and white. Oh, yes, I can totally resonate with this. This is what I like.
Yeah, totally. I love it. Something else you mentioned is this notion that it's not like you were unhappy, but it just didn't sound like certain things were fulfilling to you. And that seemed like that was enough to get you to make a change. Like sometimes, again, people feel like it has to be so bad before they're willing to make a change, not just acknowledging the fact that there's probably something it doesn't have to be awful. It can just be sort of lukewarm, but there might be something that's amazing out there that you're missing out on by staying in this sort of mediocre, lukewarm place. It sounds like that was enough for you and you were ready to make a change if that was the case.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think most of us can make things work. If we're put in a situation, most of us, even if we hate the job, we probably still have a few colleagues that we like. We like hanging out with them and commiserating together. I used to do that a lot. So, I think because we are adaptable as human beings, we can make a lot of stuff work. But it dulls us. If we are, I don't think I ever hated one of my jobs, actually. I just never felt like, this is it, and I kind of dreaded Monday mornings, and some jobs more than others. And I also, people often wanted to promote me. And that was another thing I learned about myself. I didn't want to be a top manager and manage other people, and that's often when I left too, because they were pushing me to take a promotion, and I just didn't want that. And I think a lot of people nowadays, like younger people too, they feel this pressure, they have to climb the career ladder, they have to get up there to the top. But you know what? The top isn't for everyone. It really isn't. And I think I recognized that early on. And even though I couldn't articulate it at the time, but that is also one reason why I changed jobs. But yeah, I think if you are in a job right now and it's going okay, well, that's wonderful, to make a list of the things you really enjoy about it and then see what you could add to that and then try and find that elsewhere.
I love it. A word you used is amazing, and it's an amazing segue. You said, people are incredibly adaptable, and there's 2 sides to that coin, right? There's the adaptable where you're in a job that isn't fulfilling, or you're stuck in a situation that isn't fulfilling or isn't quite aligned with where you want to be. And you're absolutely right. They're able to adapt to that situation, cope with it, grind it out, keep going, and stay there. The flip side of that coin, though, is that same adaptability is what allows you to make a change like the one you made when you were 52 to start your own business.
Yeah.
That adaptability, it's like when people start to move out of the realm of what sort of is defined as normal based on their friends and family and people who are around them, when they start to move out of that, it's like they lose the ability to see just how adaptable they are. The fact that you were able to grind it out in that job proves that you are absolutely adaptable and you can hang.
Yeah.
Like you can deal with some stuff. I would love to hear a little bit about your shift into the work that you're doing today, because that's how I found you. I was Googling and I was looking for some help, and I found your website, and it's gorgeous. And I'd love for you to just tell people a little bit about making that shift and starting your business and what you do off of your website.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much for the kind words. So, well, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I kind of fell into this, because I was designing the website for a friend of mine who did pay me for it. And then someone else asked me, and I thought, well, you know what? I've been doing this for myself for so long. I knew Squarespace really well already, and I loved it as a platform. And I wonder if I could just start my own business. And you know what's actually kind of amazing about that is when we before we moved to Bellingham, like the summer before we moved, we were visiting friends here. And now I had already lived in Bellingham before, so I knew Bellingham well. I had already contacts here. And one of my friends here, they had just built this amazing new office building in my favorite part of town. And they had these brand new offices. And we were touring the building while it was being constructed, during that vacation. And I remember walking around thinking, oh, wouldn't it be cool, to have an office in this building, with a view of the ocean or of the village. And yeah, wouldn't that be cool, but what would I do? I have no idea, I mean, it was that was so removed from anything I could have ever thought was possible, but I so remember walking around with my hard hat on and thinking that. Then 10 months later, I signed a lease on a brand new office in that building.
That's so cool.
And I was a web designer. And to me, that was one of the coolest moments ever, and so the transition, I think for me to make that leap, into deciding that I am going to start my own business, there were a couple of things that I feel were very important. And I mentioned that actually also in one of my own courses, on how to become a Squarespace web designer, make a living with that. And that's a safety net. I do believe it's important to have a safety net. My safety net was my husband, because he thankfully found a job very quickly. So he had, the regular income and he had the healthcare. And so that gave me enough peace of mind to try this, because if I failed, well, at least he had the healthcare. He was able to pay, the mortgage. And then I could find something else. I could always get a job. That was also actually a safety net, knowing I can always get a job. Even though some people said, well, yeah, but you're in your 50s. You're going to have a really hard time finding a job. And you know what? I don't believe that, actually. I know I can always find a job if I have to. So those things were really important. And I think you don't underestimate actually the importance of a safety net. And that can be anything, which is if you are in a job and you want to leave and start your own business, try and save money, have enough savings for maybe 6 months, or ideally maybe even a year, so that you can cover your basics, because you always need to cover your basics, your rent, your food and all of that. Or maybe you have a partner who is your safety net. So I think that is important. The other thing that helped is what I just talked about, is finding an office space. So for the first year, I actually had an offsite office, which allowed me to become part of a business community. And it also still made me feel like I had a proper job. I wasn't sitting at home in my pajamas all day. I do that now, but...
I mean, there are some perks to being self-employed.
Absolutely. But for the first year, at least for me, and that doesn't mean that is the case for everyone, but even if you go to like co-working spaces or so, just to kind of get out, mingle with people, meet other business owners. I mean, that also helped me get a lot of clients in my first year, because I was part of this business community. And then, of course, they were like, oh, yeah, hey, here's Kerstin, she's a web designer. And so maybe she can help us. And so that was definitely a good move. That was born out of that little dream that I had walking around with a hard hat. Oh, I'd love to have an office here. I just don't know what I would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Talk to the people who say, because you're the perfect person to speak to this. You started later in your career, right? This isn't something that you started when you were 22 or 25 or whatever. For people who feel like, because you hear this a lot, right? I can't make a change like that because I'm, too far in, too established. I'm too old. I'm too something. Talk to those people, because you did it, right? I mean, you're there, you're living breathing proof that people absolutely can make a change at that stage of their life and their career.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I will also say I never saw myself as an entrepreneur, and because I kind of liked, the safety of a regular paycheck, and I was just used to it. And but you absolutely can. I would even go as far as saying, when you do this later in life, you benefit so much for all the experience that you've gained until then. For me, becoming a web designer and business owner is really a convergence of everything I've done up to that point. Suddenly, all my previous jobs, that seemed to be so all over the place, all make sense, and they all feed into this.
That's awesome.
So I think actually what maybe you don't have in youth, you definitely have an experience, and if you have something that you feel passionate about, something that, because you know what, you will work a lot harder than you ever have, but if you love what you do, you can absolutely, it doesn't matter. I mean, I know people who are in their 60s who are doing this, and it just falls into place because everything you've learned up to that point, that is what's going to help you and actually make you the perfect person to start a business later in life.
That's awesome. As people think about moving into an entrepreneurial role, or even people who are interested in starting up a side hustle, maybe it's not going to be their full-time gig, maybe it's going to just be part of their earnings or even a passion project. Sometimes there's typically like a barrier. There's something there that is making it difficult for people. And as you and I were chatting before we jumped on to record, you mentioned that managing conflict and dealing with some of those pieces of being an entrepreneur, that was one thing that was more difficult for you. I wonder if you'd mind sharing a little bit about that, because number one, it's helpful to hear how other people overcame their own struggles, whatever those struggles might be. But then number two, I don't know that anybody enjoys conflict. So we always benefit from learning from somebody who might have learned to do it a little bit better. So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit more about that.
Okay. Well, I don't know about that. I think some people very much enjoy conflict. You just have to look at Facebook and Twitter, So, but yeah, for me, I'm someone, I hate conflict with a passion, and it's another personality type thing. I'm a type 9 on the Enneagram, and we don't like that, and we're peacekeepers, and we like things to be harmonious and peaceful. So I kind of struggled with that actually for most of my life, to be assertive, to stand my ground, to stand my position. And so when I became self-employed, I now have to deal with conflict myself, because I don't have a boss I can go to, hey, can you deal with this please for me? Or hey, I don't want to deal with this. Let someone else do this. And no, suddenly, I'm it. And so if I have a difficult situation with a client or a potential client, then I have to learn to deal with that. And that was, I have to say, a really, really hard lesson for me, because I'm generally a pretty chilled out person. I'm generally pretty nice. I believe in providing really good service. I go above and beyond for my clients. But you know what? I do have to set some boundaries still, because in the beginning, this could be that I had major scope creep on my projects, because people want more and more, and oh yeah, okay, I'll do that, because I just didn't want to say no. I had such a hard time saying no. But I learned, that no is a very, very important word in business. And sometimes that has meant leaving money on the table. Just a few months ago, I had a situation where I had started a project with a client who I really liked, but I realized this project was way out of what I want to do. It was totally scope creep. It made me tight-chested when I woke up in the morning thinking about it. And I felt bad because I actually did like the guy, whose project this was, and we got on really well. And you know what, I had to say no there, and this to me was very stressful because that was a major conflict because I had already started. I cannot just dump a client, and I had never done that before either. But it was really giving me ulcers basically, and I just knew, this could potentially drag on for months. I can't do that. So I talked to him and I was very firm and I said, you know what, I'm so sorry. I cannot do this. I paid him back the deposit, and, $2,500, which is not little money, to just lose and leave on the table, plus, whatever else he would have paid me. But I found another designer who was willing to take on the project. So I didn't just dump him and leave him empty-handed, so I gave him some other options. And he tried to keep me on and I just had to say, no, I can't do it. I'm so sorry, but, so I think I handled it in a very professional manner. We left on good terms. And I decided, okay, the money, wasn't worth the stress. And you know what? Soon after that, someone else approached me about a website, same price. It was a therapist who specializes in HSPs, highly sensitive people. I loved it. So I actually had created the room to be able to take her project on board, and that went so much better.
That's a great story. That's a really great anecdote to describe it, because it's undoubtedly something that you'll run into when you're, doing whatever sort of side or full-time entrepreneurial thing. You're going to run into people who will try to, add on additional things or get more than what you had initially agreed to. And it is really difficult. So it's great to hear that, number one, that it's hard for other people, but two, the anecdote that you shared is a really great one, because when you say yes to something, there's an opportunity cost there. You're saying no to other things that could potentially come along. And it's really important to make sure that you're saying yes to the right things.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big believer in karma. And I think what we put out there, comes back to us. Both positive and negative. And, and I certainly always try to treat people really well. And generally, I have to say, knock on wood, I have great clients, I mean, I've never really left anything on bad terms. And so I get on really well, with them and they've been great. And but every now and then, you have situations like this, and you learn that though too, that comes with experience as well. And, but I think it's really important that we know our boundaries and that we actually enforce them and stand our ground, even if it means losing money, because that is usually what drives us to do stuff that we don't want to do. It's because we can't say no to the money, because when you're working for yourself, you don't have that regular paycheck. So, there's always that fear in the background. Oh, what if this stops? What if there isn't anyone else? What then? And that is what often drives us. And, if you do accept things that maybe are not right and you just power through it, and eventually it will be done. So even if you do something that is maybe not so aligned with what you want to do, sometimes we have to power through it and kind of suck it up, but it's a learning experience, and then we know, okay, I don't want to do this again, not like this. And that can happen as well. And I think that's okay too. Sometimes we just have to power through it.
Totally get it. One other thing I wanted to ask you that I think is really interesting is, when you started this business, you said, okay, well, I know Squarespace. I'm going to be a web designer. That's a title, right? That's like a title that people go to college for. They get 4-year degrees to be a web designer. And that's sort of the powers that be give you a piece of paper that has that written on it and that says that that's what you are. You didn't go that route. And that's another thing that's difficult for people. They don't realize that there's a million different ways that you can learn how to hone a craft, whether it's something technical like what you're talking about, or whether, it's a different type of job or ability altogether. You learned by creating your own websites. You learned by helping, those initial first people who probably weren't even clients at the time. They were just like friends who and acquaintances who needed websites built. Did you ever feel weird about calling yourself a web designer or creating this business? Because sometimes people struggle with this imposter syndrome, which I think is so sad because there's so many ways to, you know what I'm saying? So many ways to hone a craft. Did you ever struggle with that at all?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the combination of, because like I said, because I'm a university dropout, so I always had that thing in the back of my mind, that I should have done this, I should have learned things properly. And I am entirely self-taught. And so it doesn't mean that I never learned anything. Of course I do. This is where Google has been my best friends, and I have taken online classes. I did try going to evening class for web design, and oh my God, that was so dry. And so I think it was also, it was like Joomla or something like that. It was the instructor was quite terrible too, which didn't help. And I learn by doing, so I basically jump in, and when I hit, an obstacle, then I go and say, okay, how do I solve this? And then I go and find my answer to that. So I'm actually not always like 100% prepared, to do that. Certainly in the beginning, when I first started out as a web designer, I have learned so much in the last 3 years. Even though I already knew Squarespace really well, there was so much more to learn. But I am very much someone, I jump in, and, if someone says, well, I need this, or a client wanted a bilingual website. And I was honest. I said, I don't know if you can do it and how you can do it if you can. I've never done that, but let me find out. And you know what? I did find out. I found a way to do it with the skills that I had. I learned a few more things along the way, and she ended up with a great bilingual website. And I think nowadays, not having, I'm not knocking official education at all. There's definitely a place for that. If you want to become a doctor, well, you better have gone to school for that. I'm sorry,
I would hope so.
And I think there is definitely a lot of merit in what you can learn. And so I don't knock that at all. And but I think, again, it's not for everyone, and there are so many other components that fall into this, because it's not just about the technical side of knowing how to do something, but it's also, okay, how do you now go and sell this to people? How do you convince people that, you're the best person for the job? How do you meet people? How do you get your leads? And there's so many other aspects that you also have to manage. You wear so many hats, as a business owner. And coming back to your question about, was it weird for me to call myself a web designer? It totally was, and I totally felt, probably for the first 2 years, I felt a bit like a fraud. I even have had people, fellow designers, email me, like WordPress designers saying, oh, you're working with Squarespace. That's not a proper web designer. Who are you kidding, And I thought, what, there's so much more to Squarespace than you'll probably ever know, because you're just stuck in WordPress land, and you can absolutely be a proper web designer in Squarespace, and but yeah, I definitely had the imposter syndrome in the beginning, and where I did think, wow, can I really call myself this? And all I can say is, when you have these fears, and I know it's very common, I know a lot of people have that, because a lot of people do take more unconventional paths. With the internet these days, you can teach yourself so much stuff.
Totally.
So I would just say, what? If you enjoy it, the reason why I became good at what I do is because I like it. I love it when I can find a piece of code that can actually do what I wanted to do. I'm like thrilled. I'm like, oh, yay. This is like, even nowadays, that still gets me excited, and so if you really enjoy what you do, just keep at it. Learn what you need to learn. You don't even need to know everything when you start out. You don't, because you learn on the job. And so don't let that be a fear that keeps you from jumping in, because you feel you don't have everything in place yet. You'll never have everything in place. It just doesn't work like that.
That's so awesome. Like, that made me smile so much, because people worry about that so much. And if there's anything that you need as proof of how awesome Kerstin is, seriously, just go to her website. It completely speaks for itself. It is what made me reach out to you, because I was so excited about how vibrant but clean and functional and organized and just awesome it was. And one of the reasons why I wanted to reach out to you is I frequently get asked by audience members, people who listen to the podcast, and other people who visit my website about, how to start their own businesses, how to start their own gigs on the side, how to create their own thing. And anything that you're creating, it does these days. We were kind of mentioning this before we started recording. You need a website because people just sort of expect that they're going to be able to find the initial sets of, answers to their questions on the web. And I never want that barrier to be the thing that keeps people from doing what they want to do. It is such an easy one to get over simply by giving you a call. I mean, it's such an easy one to get over. So before we wrap up today, help people find you. Where can people find you, and what types of services do you offer on your website?
So my web address is kerstinmartin.com, and Kerstin is spelled Kerstin, and then Martin, Martin.com. And I offer, three types of things, really. I offer one-on-one services where I build a website for you. And I'm actually shifting to what I call a 3-day wonder website. So I develop websites in 3 days. They have maximum of 5 or 6 pages, so there's certain criteria that need to be fulfilled for me to be able to do that. And so that is the one-on-one service that I do still offer. And I do like 1 or 2 of those a month. I also offer Ask Me Anything sessions where you can book me for 1 hour and pick my brain. Pick my considerable Squarespace brain or business brain or anything. So I often find actually we end up talking about all sorts of stuff during those sessions. And check it out on my website and see what other people have said about those. And then the third thing that I offer is online courses in all things Squarespace. So I have a course on how to build a Squarespace website from scratch. That is for beginners and intermediate Squarespace users. So if you've never used Squarespace before, that course is perfect for you. I have an SEO course, on how to optimize your website, your Squarespace website. And I have a course on how to host e-courses on Squarespace. I found a way to tweak Squarespace if you want, so that I can host my e-courses on it. And I love it. And people love it too.
Oh, we are going to need to talk about that.
Yeah, it's wonderful, actually. You have to, like I say, you have to tweak the system a bit. I'm using some coding and stuff, but I share all of that in my course on how to do that. And once you have it all set up, you don't have to worry about that anymore. You can just focus on your content and on running your course. And so I've been doing it for 2 years. I've been hosting e-courses on Squarespace, and it's great. I love it. I also have that's one of my newer courses called BizBox, and that is basically how to start a business as a Squarespace web designer. It's a business course. You mentioned, I don't know if we mentioned it in the podcast or before we started recording, talking about how to set up an LLC and all that. I do actually share that, just my own experience,
nice.
And finances, how I set up my finances. I share all my systems and all my tools and all my resources in this course. And I talk about how to get clients, all the things I've done, about the pitfalls, the things to watch out for, all the things I have learned in the last 3.5 years. It's basically a completely, exclusive glimpse into my business, and I'm very, very open. I talk about my numbers, what I'm earning, all of that, because I really believe that, systems and tools matter. They can make your life easier when you start your own business, and a website is definitely important. Don't overthink it. Even if you start just with a couple of pages, an about page, a services page, about things you offer, maybe a blog, You don't need to overthink it. And with Squarespace, the nice thing is that you can do a lot of it yourself. And it does sometimes depend on your degree of, how technical you want to be. But, Squarespace is kind of an out of the box solution, but you can certainly do a lot of tweaking and make it your own. That's what I love about it. You can totally make it your own. And it's really not that difficult. So start with your website, and then start with, I would definitely recommend, if you are going to deal with clients, to look at how you're going to invoice them, how you're going to do contracts, and what systems are you using for that. I share all of that in my course as well. Early on, I actually used 17 Hats, just 17, the number hats.com. That's my client management tool. And I'm so glad I adopted that early on, because that allowed me to do my contracts. So do my contracts, my quotes, my invoicing, all of that online, and have it all in one place. It works great. Another one that people like to use is dubzado.com. So it's a bit of an investment, but it's a worthwhile investment, because then you don't have to spend all this time figuring out your administrative side of things. You can absolutely use spreadsheets too, if you want to. I actually share my early spreadsheet as well. There are certain things that will definitely help you, but I'm a big believer in keeping things as simple as possible. So I don't use a ton of different productivity tools. I don't use Asana or things like that. I know it works great for some people. I'm actually quite old-fashioned. My inbox is my to-do list, so I'll just share like one little productivity tip that's really helped me. I have 2 folders in my mailbox, one to do this week, one to do next week. So as emails come in, what I leave in my inbox is what I'm looking at today. That's what I'm doing today. And anything else gets moved into the to do this week folder, or if it can be done a little later, into the to do next week folder. When I reach inbox 0, I go to my to-do this week folder and I pull out the next thing that I want to work on. That works great. And I use a bullet journal too. So I actually have a bit of an analog system as well. But I keep it simple, because you can spend more time trying to set up your systems and your productivity and organize yourself than actually doing your work. So
I totally agree. That's awesome. And thank you for sharing that too, because the tools and tips that you have, I've definitely run into that as well, where you can get way overboard in software and things like that, when really that stuff is going to come as you grow. If you need it, you'll find it. You can build something at another time. Just get off the ground and start making money. Before I let you go today, I have to ask you one last question. We are compiling a Spotify Power playlist, which is a list of motivational songs that have all been curated by the incredible women that I have interviewed on this podcast. So I have to ask you for your favorite motivational song to add to it.
My favorite right now is from Coldplay. I love Coldplay, and it's called Adventure of a Lifetime. It's a very uplifting song. I just love the tune. I love
that song.
Yeah, and that's my happy song. Whenever I hear that on the radio, I just turn it up, and that's totally my happy song. It's positive. It's I just love it.
I love that so much. That's such a good song. I can hear it in my head right now. I love it. And it's just making me smile. Kerstin, thank you. Seriously. I know I completely cold called you out of the blue and was like, hey, I love your website and you have to be on my podcast, because I have people who ask me about websites and I want to be able to send them to someone, because that's just not what I do. So for those listening to this, if there is a passion project that you have, or a side hustle, or a full out business that you are thinking about starting, do not let the website or the technology side of it be the thing that stops you. You absolutely have a resource. Kerstin is it. She can help you out with that type of thing. I intentionally reached out to her because I get asked so often about how to start businesses, how to start a passion project, how to start something on the side and move out of your, traditional job. I harp on that all the time on the podcast. And one of people's sticking points that I hear all the time is, I'm not technical. I don't know how to make a website. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. That should not be the thing that stops you. So, dabble around in Squarespace yourself, or if you don't feel comfortable with that, give Kerstin a call, set her up with one of those Ask Me Anything sessions. It's an amazing resource. I just really appreciate you being on here, Kerstin, because you're a really valuable resource for people so that they can go pursue their dreams and start doing the work that really gets them fired up and gets them excited. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity, April. I actually really enjoyed this. This was really fun. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, so this was wonderful. And I really do hope that it was helpful to your listeners as well. So thank you.
Podcast number 1 under your belt. Oh my gosh. I really hope you guys enjoyed that interview with Kerstin Martin. And I hope you take a minute to go check out her website. And I think you're going to find it just as beautiful as I did. And you'll understand why I was so excited to have her on the podcast. Now, as always, I want to hit a few things before we close out this week. Number 1, if there is anything I am so incredibly passionate about, you guys know I thump on this soapbox all the time. It is intentional life design. You have one life to live, and it is a complete waste, or at least at best, it's a half-life. If you are not taking steps to bring your life into alignment with your goals and the way that you want to live so that you feel great and that your strengths are being maximized, all those good things, that requires some intentional work on your part. And life design is something that can help you get there. And it's really interesting because it's something that is starting to become more popular, and it grew out of the field of design thinking, which is something that I became more familiar with in my other company, sort of my day job at Sprocket Customer Experience. We focus on using design thinking to help companies design better products and design better customer experiences and just operate better. Design thinking is this incredible set of tools, but it is also, as I'm ruminating on it and thinking about it more, it is also a brilliant set of tools to help you think through big shifts in your life and how to navigate changes and even make tiny changes that'll bring your life into alignment with the way that you want it to be. And what's cool about design thinking is at its core, the very place that you start with every design thinking project is with the human. It is human centered. Now, from a business perspective, that typically means customers, right? We want to get to know customers and them as humans. In this case, you are the human. You are the main human in your life. And so life design starts with you. It starts with your goals. It starts with your personality. It starts with your strength. It starts with your non-negotiables. All of those things that should go into the foundation of what drives the decisions of where you work and what relationships you're in and how you spend your day and where you spend your time. All of those should be made with you, the human, in mind. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying life design with design thinking as a set of tools and techniques with you at its core. And we talked so much about that with Kerstin, and she was such a great example of a person who has done just that. She is also a great example of sort of the end stage of design thinking where you're starting to test and run small experiments and prototypes. You're throwing little tests out there. Do I like this hobby? Do I think I might like that as a career? Do I want to explore a relationship like this? Is this hobby something that might be fun to me? You make small tests, small experiments, small changes that aren't giant, risky changes. I'm not asking you to totally throw your entire life out and make large, sweeping changes. That's so risky. Instead, you can make these small adjustments and see whether you might like something or at least get an idea before you make a big sweeping change. That's exactly what design thinking does for companies, and it's exactly what it can do for you as you start to think about how to bring your own life into alignment with you, the human, at its core. Now, number 2, I want to hit on something that Kerstin talked about, and that is trust yourself, but have a safety net. She was talking about as you go out and you explore entrepreneurial, activities, it really helps to have a safety net. And that might be your 9-to-5 job. Maybe you don't quit it right away. That might be a spouse. That could be savings, or it could be you being laid off and getting a severance from your job. It could be any number. It could take a million different forms, but having that safety net in place can really help you make that big leap, or what can feel feel like a really big leap. From there, you need to trust yourself. So I want to hit on those two sides a little bit more. So on the safety net side, there has been some research, and it was Marie Forleo who cited it, and I'm forgetting the study specifically right now, but there is a large increase, and it was like, I don't know, threefold or something like that increase in the businesses of entrepreneurs who succeed when it starts as a side hustle and they've got that safety net in place. It can be an extreme amount of pressure to try to get a passion project, something that you are so in love with. It can be hard to get that off the ground if you have the pressure on yourself that that activity has to generate a full-time income. That can be so difficult, and you might be, I guess, motivated or you might feel pressure to stop pursuing that passion project sooner than you normally would if it's not producing this level of income that you need to sustain your whole life. Instead, people become more successful when they have that safety net in place and they start to explore those passion projects without all of the pressure of having to sustain their entire financial life. Just something to keep in mind. If you're thinking about venturing out onto your own, can you do it on the side? Can you save some money for a little bit? Can you set that as a goal for maybe 2019 or 2020 and start taking the small steps today that will create that safety net for you so that you can do it and really pursue it with passion without all of the pressure that you might have if you didn't have that safety net in place. The other side of that coin, though, is the trust yourself part. So Kerstin did not have a degree in web design, and she's a web designer today. She is working as a web designer. You can teach yourself anything. We live in a brilliant day and age where anything you want to learn is available for free on the other side of a really good Google search. So really take that initiative and start to learn new things. YouTube is such an incredible asset that we haven't had access to before. And I encourage you, if you're even thinking about something and you're nervous in that respect, start doing some Google searches and some searches on YouTube. You will be amazed at how much information is out there. And the more it aligns with your passion. So again, going back to the first thing I wanted to hit, life design. Can you align your work with something that you're so passionate and so in love with? The more it aligns, the harder you're going to work and the more you're going to persist when you hit a barrier or a snag. So that alignment piece is so critical if you're going to start to tackle something big and bold and new. And the last thing that I want to hit, and it may seem so obvious, but oh my gosh, it is so important to hit this. It is never too late. I loved that Kerstin talked about how the experience that you have from being in your career, the experience you have from living the life that you've lived is an asset. It is not something that should be looked at as a detriment. Sometimes it just takes a little bit to find your passion. I want to challenge you to think that maybe you are exactly where you're supposed to be right now. What if this is exactly the right time for you to be starting something new? What if it's not too late? I mean, gosh, when you're 30, you'll probably look back and think, man, if I would have started when I was 20. When you're 40, gosh, if I would have started when I was 30. When you're 60, gosh, if I would have started when I was 50. And those 50-year-olds are thinking, man, it's way too late. No, it isn't. It's never too late. If you are passionate about something and it is something that will light your soul on fire and you have air left to breathe and years left to live, it is worth pursuing it and it's worth giving it a shot. It is never too late. Before we close out today, I want to say thank you to my producer, Cameron Hill, and to my incredible sponsor, Modern Well. If you want to learn more about how you can reach your goals in a one-of-a-kind work-life community, visit www.modernwell.co. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who might benefit from this inspiring message. And if you have a moment, click the link in the episode description to leave me a rating and a review on iTunes. It would mean so much to me. Finally, I want to remind you that it is absolutely possible to live a happy, fulfilling life, even in spite of all of the chaos and demands we all experience. Sign up at aprilseifert.com to gain access to tools that will help you do just that. I have carefully created and curated a set of tools that combine the powerful fields of psychology and design thinking to help you intentionally create a fulfilling, happy life you love. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and until next week, stay inspired.